Good evening. My name is Pablo Bello. I'm the host of Tiempo Latino, show for the Hispanic community and for the community in general. Let me introduce myself. I'm a journalist. I graduated from Wayne State University. I worked for several newspapers and weeklies in Chicago, California, Texas, Arkansas, and now here in Grand Rapids. Tonight we're going to talk about immigration. There is a tragedy right now happening at the border with Mexico and United States. Thousands of children crossing the border, looking for political asylum, looking for protection, escaping from the gangs from Central America, from Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador. This is a real tragedy because they are stuck on the border. They are arrested by immigration service, by the border patrol, and they are stuck in these detention centers such as Artesia. They don't have access to lawyers. They don't have access to services. They are pretty scared. Immigration advocates are denouncing these children. The border patrol is violating their rights because they don't have access to lawyers. They are in detention center. They are super cold. They don't have proper clothing for these places where the temperature is less than 70 degrees. But before Raymond Trujillo, who was part of Tiempo Latino, he's going to make an announcement. He is participating in our prize this year. How are you, Raymond?
Pretty good, Pablo. Thank you for inviting me to your show. Like you said, this year, I'm participating in the Art Prize 2004. And my piece will be a large piñata, 10 feet high by 9 feet long. At the same time, it's going to be an interactive piece in which Mundine the clown is going to be passing balloons to the kids. And same time, well, not the same time, but the following day, I'm going to alternate the instructor, the Mexican folklore instructor, Raymond Trujillo, and he will be performing different dances for different regions of Mexico. This piece is going to be, like I said, interactive, in which I'm going to celebrate my culture because this month is the month of Mexican independence.
It's also we're celebrating the Hispanic heritage this month.
Yes.
From September 15 to October 15.
Yes, and the reason I show a donkey is because I represent my culture. It sounds kinda bad, but it's not bad because I show a donkey. Donkey, the characteristic of the donkey is an animal that is strong, and we use it to carry stuff, heavy stuff, and it's a loyal animal. And at the same time, my culture is the same way. We are loyal people and strong and real honest, and that's the reason I chose the donkey this year for my art piece to make this giant piñata. Another thing that I want to say is thank you to all my sponsors. They helped me out to build the piñata. At the same time, they support me with some materials, and also your show today. For being here.
Of course.
Thank you.
We try to encourage artists from our community to show the positive thing in our community. We are not just as the mainstream media try to portray us like just crimes and rapes and thefts and like these horrible things. We have artists, we have people successful like Freddy Martinez, who's an immigrant who came as a child, and now he has his own business, a small business. Yeah. He's the owner of this business. He came from Honduras when he was a child. And we have also Richard Kessler. He's an honorary Latin American now. He's a lawyer, an expert in immigration. And he's going to talk about immigration and the tragedy that's happening in the border with Mexico, where all these thousands of children stuck on these places in this detention center. So if you have any question about this topic, please call 616 area code 459-4881. Call us with questions about this is a very important issue because President Obama is going to make an announcement. Supposed to be he was going to make an announcement at the end of the summer, but the candidates who are running for senators and they want to be also candidates for the states. They asked to Obama to make the announcement later, probably by Thanksgiving. That's saying for Thanksgiving by the end. Thanksgiving, right?
I hope so.
And he's probably going to make an announcement, and he made this an announcement a few weeks ago. He's going to try to help these children. They are on the border. They are coming from Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador, Central America, escaping the violence created by the drug traffickers, the violence created by U.S. policies in Central America, such as the war of the 80s in the 80s, supported by the U.S. and Ronald Reagan. You remember when they started sending millions of dollars to supply weapons, to supply dead squads in Central America. All these are factors that are affecting the immigration. It's not one day we wake up and we decide that we want to come to the United States. But this is an issue. This is a tragedy in the border. All these children, they are coming by themselves, traveling in the beast. This called this train that runs along Mexican territory. And let's allow Raymond to continue with his announcement.
Okay. Well, like I said, I just want to invite everyone to visit my piece. It's going to be on the boardwalk here by Monroe. And I want to invite everyone on the 13th, which is the artist opening, so everybody can meet the artist. And we're going to have food. We're going to have other restaurants. They're going to serve their specialties in there, and they're going to be for free. On the 24th, our price is going to be open for all the public, so you guys can go everywhere. So I invite everyone, especially the Latinos, to come and vote for me. And one thing that I want to mention is that I want to thank Boardwalk, for let me have my piñata at their place. It's going to be an interesting piece, and I hope you guys enjoy a little bit of my culture. I'm going to be showing Mexican folklore dances, and Smundin the Clown are going to be passing animal balloons and a lot of information about the piece. And
I would like to talk a little bit about you, Raymond. Like, you are an artist, right?
Yes.
He's painting. He makes
yeah.
murals.
I mean, I was a multi, with the man with the many hats. I'm a floral designer.
Handyman.
I am a floral designer. I am a graphic designer. I'm an artist. I'm a sculptor. I teach dance. I'm a party coordinator, and at the same time, I teach waltzes for quinceañeras. I do all this in my own time, and my telephone number is 616-516-9670. This is my number, and in case you guys want to contact me and need some of my work done. I also an airbrush artist. I can use airbrush. I'll use any media. What else can we do? Piñatas. I do piñatas. And the clown. I do Mundine, the show for birthday parties. What else can?
Yeah, well, you have like these extraordinary pieces of art, right? Like you painted immigration topics.
Oh yes, I've been
Mexican
painting
culture.
See, well, I have different themes. They have different themes in my art. I like to express myself. I'm not a person that I can speak. I get nervous right away. So the way I can express myself is through my paintings, through my floral arrangements. That's the way I communicate to the public. I have a painting that I gave to my friend Lupe Ramos Martinez, and it talks about that, about immigration. And I also, my friend Guadalupe Danay, also I gave another painting, and it talks about crossing the border. And it's interesting paintings that I painted because I felt it. I live in the borderline between Mexico and United States, and I see that happening all the time. Since I was little, I see people passing through my house, and sometimes we'll help them out, giving food or
Water.
clothes, water, or show them the way where it was closer to cross the border.
The best.
Yeah,
Right.
because the river, I live in Tamaulipas, the borderline between Roma, Texas, and Miguel Alemán. That's where I live. And when I was younger, they built this big bridge out of concrete and excavate a lot of gravel from the river. So they create a lot of big holes in there. So when the river goes real high, those create a lot of, how you call it?
Whirlpool.
Yes, the whirlpools. And people don't know about it. And up there you are swimming this way, like on the top, but when you get
Suck you,
close,
no?
they suck you all the way down and drag you like miles away.
Wow.
By the time you get over there, you already, they find you all dead. And so there's a lot of places how you, as people living in the borderline, we know because and when you can cross it also. Well, I'm just telling you that. Because what I live is like
This is the life in the border, right?
yeah, the life on the borderline.
This
yeah.
is the Mexican border. Like
And that's
thousands
what
of
I
people
paint. I
crossing
paint
the
my
border, huh?
life. And that's what I paint, because things that I saw when I was little, things that I seeing on news and stuff, and that's I paint. I express myself through my
Your
paintings.
experiences, right? And you also paint about Mexican topics like
Yeah,
the Mexican
a lot of Mexican folklore
dances,
and dance. Yes.
like the deer dance.
The deer dance, the Tamaulipas, a lot of every dance has their own. How can I say, their own costume, their own music, and every culture expresses themselves in different way. Like we're talking about the deer dance. The deer dance is a mystical dance. They use it in celebrations, like on days of Easter. In Easter time, they use it as one of the rituals for in the churches. Like the Aztecs, they use the Aztec dance for the Virgin of Guadalupe, representing the Aztec community. So every dance has their own tradition and their own time to dance, and that's what I teach in my culture, my dances. That's what you were talking about, because the other day we perform. Actually, you been in one of my performances when we performed for the Aztec dance for the Virgin of Guadalupe. And but yeah, that's a part of my route that I teach and love to do, dance.
All right, so now let's talk to Freddy Martinez. I forgot to introduce Richard Kessler.
Oh, I think you did.
He's an expert on immigration. He's been practicing
Spanish.
for how long?
Oh, practicing for a long time, 32 years.
32 years in.
I still don't get it right, but I'm still practicing.
And we have here Freddy Martinez, who's an immigrant. As I say, he owns his own business right now. He came as a child when he was 10 years old from Honduras. He told me he came because he was escaping violence in Honduras, right?
Exactly.
In Honduras there is these gangs that are called Las Maras. They are extremely violent people who are in charge of bringing drugs to the United States. They use children. He was telling me that they use children to indoctrinate them, to bring drugs and make all these horrible things. They also are used as to kill people, right?
I mean, what they do, they try to manipulate you, saying, I want you to bring this package to some places. So when, because normally police, sometimes they don't take care of those, if they see a kid, they never going to think that they're going to bring drugs, things like that. So, but sometimes, they use those little kids to bring drugs to a house, or they say, can you bring this package to someplace else? So, but like what I say, in my case, because I lost my family.
Your mom passed away, right?
My mom passed away when I was 9 years old, about cancer. Because we was kind of like poor, and over there, when they had to be with the doctors and medicine, that's money over there too. But that's the thing, when you don't have nothing else to do. In that case, I was a little kid, 9 years old. But when she passed away, I was like, that was the only person that was close, that I was so close to my mom, because I never know my dad. So because I never know my dad, that was the only close person that was with me, my mom. But once my mom was gone, everything was like, I was feeling alone. And
the world is falling apart for you, right?
so, I was kind of like living on the street. In other words, she left me outside. And one thing, and I still, thinking about her, because she never recommended me to nobody else. I mean, once she passed away, I know that she know that I was the person that I'm very, trying to become successful, because I never been involved in drugs or alcohol or things like that. So I was trying to stay away from gangs problem or be involved in drugs, things like that. So in that case, I was.
So we wanna show to the people that, we read in the newspaper, we see on TV that, gang members are coming here. Like, this is not true. It's children escaping, looking for a better life. Like Freddy, who stay away from drugs, who stay away from guns, and who wanna come here for a better life. He didn't wanna be part of these drug traffickers. He didn't wanna be part of these criminals. So he decided to come here. And this is the case of thousands and thousands of children that are coming here. They are no gang members. They are simple children escaping violence in their own country, right?
Exactly. It's like what I say when I left. Can you imagine? I was 10 years old. I was a little kid. And the funny thing is, and the weird thing is that when I left, I was 10 years old, but I was looking like a 5 years old kid. I mean, a lot of, because I wasn't that healthy person too. Especially when what you do is like work in a farm. And working on a farm, it's not easy job too, especially when you don't eat well, when you don't eat good. I mean, what are you expecting about that? And that's why I say, and I was a little kid, and sometimes, it's hard. It's so hard when you are a little kid. But it's hard when you don't have nobody to support you or to help you. And this is one thing, you know, at least in here in America, I see the law, you know, the law is way, way different from my country. So over here, you know, when they see a kid or teenager, that's for sure, you know, the government, they support them. Because that's I came to learn. But once you're over there, you live your life, so you have to sit by yourself. So in other words, you know, you have to try to survive no matter what. And that's why I was, you know, in that situation. But the thing is, when you don't have no family, this is the problem. When you don't have no family, when nobody is around you or parents, you know, to help you. So what happened? So everybody want to be your parents, you know? Is that true, you know? Everybody want to, you know, take advantage about you. And, you know, at some point you get tired, you know? So in other words, you know, you get abused about other people using you, about, you know, telling you what to do. And sometimes, you know, just because they want to use you, you know, and they don't care, you know. And sometimes they might help you, but they might help you with a reason.
To take advantage of you, no?
Exactly.
So when you decide to come back here?
You know, there's a lot of things, you know. There's news, there's TV, and you see a lot of people too, you know, come this country. You hear a lot about this country there. It's a blessing country. And, you know, you hear all that, you know, good thing from America. But in my case, I was like, because I was by myself, I was more like trying to survive. And when you feel in that situation, the only thing is feel like, you know, it was so bad when my mom passed away. When she passed away, I was feeling like the sun more like hitting me, you know, I was feeling more the sun, I was feeling more like lonely because there was nobody with me. So when you are in that situation, you know, it's so hard. It's not easy, you know, because you see yourself, and when you see a lot of things going on around you, like gangs problem, drugs problem, you know, and I'm telling you, like, it been for, like, this was in 96, and I don't know if you hear about there was something happened in Honduras too, the tornado that happened, the hurricane, and everything, and that, you know, and that was in 1996, 98, 96, something like that. And that, when that happened, everything that happened. So, you know, there was a lot of things going on. So, and because I was feeling alone, I was just feeling like going, you know, just leave, you know, be gone, no matter what, you know, because I say one thing, is I never tried, and I remember this, I heard other kid talking, they was older than me, you know, they was older than me, and I was hearing them, they was thinking coming this way, you know, coming to North America, come to America. So because I was in that situation, I was thinking like, why not to try it? It's better, you know, die trying and die and never try it.
There you go.
So, you know, when I was feeling in that situation, I was like, let me go, you know.
So what was happening then, Richard? Do you remember what happened in those years in Honduras, Central America, 94?
Well, there's a long historical situation in Central America. You had touched on it earlier, Pablo, and you talked a little bit about the Contra situation, and that was the name of the group in Nicaragua that was opposed to the elected government in Nicaragua. And it all kind of goes back, or part of this, you have to have a long historical perspective that goes back to what they called the Cold War, La Guerra Fria, and it was in this perspective of the United States viewing everything internationally as how can we protect ourselves from the communist conspiracy. And of course, first it was Russia, and then communist China, and of course we had our situation in Vietnam and Southeast Asia where we, you know, the United States unfortunately was involved for many years and caused the death of millions of people. is supposedly to protect them from the, quote, communist menace. And in our hemisphere, in the Western Hemisphere, in the Americas, of course, the leading villains were the Cubans, who were allied with the then called Soviet Union, which was, at that time at least, a socialist country. And there was a great fear that, and this actually goes back to the 50s, I think Nixon had a famous trip to South America in 1958 where he talked about the communist menace coming through South America. And of course there were Che Guevara and people in South America that were part of insurgent guerrilla groups that were trying to bring really economic justice. And it came to a heat in Central America, which is, as people may know, is kind of halfway between the United States, North America, and South America. And Honduras is the middle country of Central America. And during this time, there were large-scale insurrections in primarily in El Salvador, Nicaragua. People may remember what was called the Sandinista group, which was named after a famous freedom fighter from the 30s. But they were involved in a struggle for economic self-determination in Nicaragua, El Salvador, and Guatemala. Really not so much Honduras. Honduras was a little bit to the side until the United States came in and said, in order to stop the so-called communist threat, which was really a populist threat, which was poor people and working people and farm peasants, saying enough of the with the historic, I guess what you could even call, in that case, it was almost people being treated as peons, especially in the agriculture. You had like the situation in El Salvador with 12 families that controlled 75% of the land. In Honduras, not quite as much, but there was still extreme economic domination. To a lesser extent in Mexico because of the wars and revolution in 1910. So there was a long history of agrarian reform in Mexico. But in Central America, finally people said enough is enough. And in some places it was more of an armed resurrection. Some places it was also political. There were elections, democratic elections in Nicaragua, particularly where the left group, the Sandinistas, won the elections. The United States wasn't happy with that. And I'm trying to make a long story even longer, but the United States then supported an armed group that was known as the Contras, the Contrarrevolucionarios, in Nicaragua, which was a right-wing group. I don't know if people remember this guy, Ali North. I don't know if anyone remembers him. Goes back to the 80s, who was kind of an infamous guy who was a colonel who worked with the CIA.
Trading drugs and weapons.
Exactly, and he was involved in trading. That's funny because at the same time where the U.S. is talking about a war on drugs, they were trading actually weapons for drugs for support against the democratically elected government in Nicaragua and helping these people that were called the Contras, and they didn't care if they used drugs or not. But what happened is that country, particularly Honduras, which before that time, and this probably precedes a little bit Freddy's time and maybe his mother's time, was a fairly nonviolent country. I mean, there was some crime. My wife's from Honduras, and I'm talking to her and her mother-in-law many times. I mean, if somebody robbed somebody with a knife, that was a big thing when in the 50s and 60s. My God, people talk about, terrible crime thing. And there was very few, there wasn't armed violence. And then what happened is during this Contra time, where the U.S. established bases in Honduras for counter-revolutionaries from Nicaragua to fight against a democratic elected government in Nicaragua. And eventually there were literally, I don't know how many, tens of thousands of arms that were dumped into Central America to be used by this counter-revolutionary group, the Contras. Of course,
they were trained in the U.S., right?
The U.S. trained, that's a whole different, that's a great story to talk about sometime, something people may have known about what's called the, in Georgia, in Fort Denning, Georgia, there's a place called the
Escuela de las Américas.
Right, the American school where they train Latin American soldiers really in torture and repression. And that, in fact, that center is still open. In fact, every year there's protests down there but it was particularly vehement during this time. And it also, we can again spend a whole program talking about Chile and Argentina and other countries in South America that were also victims of the so-called U.S. Military assistance, which instead of helping the people was used to oppress the people. But anyway, so what happens is that especially Honduras, you can see that a country that had been fairly peaceful, there was a lot of economic oppression going on. There was a lot of poverty. There was economic exploitation. Again, we had a very small amount of people, about 5% of the people controlling the great majority of the wealth.
And this is the story of Mexico too, isn't it, Richard?
Absolutely, yeah.
Mexico wasn't a violent country like the way it is now. 20 years ago, when I came to this country, you were able to walk on the streets of any city, any town in Mexico, 3 or 4 in the morning.
Yeah, the amazing thing about Mexico, I remember in the 70s, first going to Mexico City, and people would complain about the same way about New York City at that time, because there were there was a few street muggings, and all the people from La Provincia, from the outlying states, would say, guys, you can't go to Mexico City. I'm sure that's people Tamaulipas. You go down there, you get anywhere the other side of Monterrey, and there are a bunch of robbers and thieves, and all it was is mostly street. I mean, street. People might take a knife and take or pickpockets or things like that. Now Mexico City, same as New York City, after so much police repression, they're almost the safest areas, particularly the areas where all the financial centers are, et cetera, and all the big businesses are. And all the violence is spread out to the border and spread out to the outlying rural areas.
Now places such as Raymond town,
the whole border,
they
you go
used
to
to be the
from
most,
Matamoros all the way to Ciudad Juarez. Or
Pacific places in Mexico.
Absolutely.
They are the most violent places.
Yeah.
But Richard, what's going
So
on?
the second thing, just real quickly, is then the whole drug thing comes in. And because the U.S. is the biggest consumer and the trillions of dollars that are generated in the United States in buying drugs, where there's a market for something, there's going to be somebody that wants to make money for it. And so they found, ways how to get the drug that's produced, primarily the cocaine in South America. Although, what did I just hear about cocaine being grown in Mexico? I just heard about that last week. They found some cocaine being grown in Chiapas, in far south Mexico. But so you got to get the drugs up here. So how do you get the drugs up here to make these trillions of dollars? One of the ways they found out was they found different staging areas, and one of the big areas now is they call this the Death Triangle in northern Central America, between Honduras and Guatemala and a little bit of El Salvador. And when you get all those drugs and all that drug money, somebody's got to protect that money. Somebody's got to bring the drugs and take the money back. And that's how they established also these gangs, which were kind of, especially ones that started in El Salvador, were outgrowths of gangs in Southern California, where people were protecting themselves from gangs of people that mostly Chicano, Mexican, American gangs. When they started picking on, just like anybody else, the newcomers, so the Salvadorian kids got together and formed their own gangs. Then they end up getting deported back to Central America, and these gangs bring guns, bring ultra-violence, bring this whole gang mentality that they never had in El Salvador and Honduras. So it's a really kind of vicious circle, this whole relationship between the United States. So the bottom line is the U.S. can't wash its hands of the situation in Central America. I'd like to call it more sort of and not the first one, it's really a humanitarian crisis among these young people coming here. And what we have to look at, like what Freddy was saying, is why are the young people, coming to the United States? Why do they need to leave their home countries?
But you remember, Chris, I'm sorry, but you remember about Honduras a lot, because I was listening to you, and I was like, but I don't know if you remember there was in one moment Honduras was so violent, and they put a law. They say if they see you from sometime to sometime, they kill you outside. They call toque de queda. So I remember that, and I was so scared when that happened too, because at that time I was kind of like sleeping outside too, trying to hiding myself, because I don't want to die just to die, And I remember, and I still remember that moment very, very well, and I was so scared. I was a little kid at that time. I don't know if you still remember that.
Yeah, and there was reaction. What happened, what Freddy's talking about then, sometimes there would be a kind of an ultra reaction. So what would happen is that the government and the police would take things into their own hands. Well, part of it was some quasi-legal thing saying you can't go out at night, and part of it was just sort of roaming police squads that were terrorizing young people, anybody that had a tattoo, anybody that lived in a certain neighborhood. So this also was another factor that happens, and still it's happening now in, particularly in El Salvador and Honduras, and this, probably a little bit lesser extent in Guatemala and Mexico, where so-called authorities, you know, the police, the legal police, and sometimes in Honduras it's the military that functions as the police in most places, and also the military police in El Salvador, like they supposedly, to protect the public, become the victimizers themselves, the people causing the violence. And so what do? They terrorize the young people. Some of them, many of them are innocent. Some of them may or may not have, you know, caused some crime, usually more of a petty crime. So it kind of gets a vicious circle, and then the young people are defending themselves. They get, especially as these drug groups and drug lords bring better weapons and better money there, they're defending themselves. So you have a situation where they say even in Mexico, that where the so-called gangs, the maras or the gangs or the cartels in Mexico have better arms than the regular army and the police. So it's a crazy situation that you
Cartel
have.
de Sinaloa,
But
the cartel of Sinaloa is
So it's
ultra powerful group of criminals.
But look at this.
They have,
you know, he's talking about a few years ago. Can you imagine nowadays? It's worth.
Yeah.
I mean, it's terrible. It's like in Honduras now. I know they're growing drugs like crazy because there's a part in Honduras, you know, they call Olancho, you know, in that part is like, yeah, in that part, you know, they call you know, ancho para entrar y angosto para salir. So that means, you know, it's a big way to go
kind
in.
of the Texas of Honduras. Always the law, the Western law. Everybody carries a gun.
Yeah, so you know, and they don't. I mean, you don't have to look those people, you know, a little bit weird because you are that person.
Yeah,
That's how
the
it
same
is.
situation in Mexico. Like we had these ultra-violent gangs. The Zetas is the most violent gang in Mexico. You can even look to their eyes to these guys because
Well,
if
say
you do
the
that,
name.
it's like you're
Say the name.
challenging or say their name. You know, like not even mention their name because they beat you up.
Yeah.
And this is terrible. But Richard,
You can
what
make a
about-
song about them. That's okay.
what-
You can have a narco corrido. But,
Oh yeah, that's
what-
fine.
Yeah.
what's going on right now?
But anyways,
on the
yeah, so
border?
we've talked, so what's happened right now is in the last, particularly last 3 or 4 years, is because of the violence in Central America and Mexico, and particularly the effect that this violence has had on young people, and sometimes very young people, kids 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, is that those kids and young people have decided, the same as Freddy was talking about. I mean, if it's a question of survival, the one thing that people have heard and is famous throughout Central America, and really famous throughout the world. I mean, we just said that Central Americans have one advantage; they're a lot closer than, for example, Africans may try to go to Europe or Northern Africa. But Central Americans and Mexicans, you always think about the United States as this great place for safety and economic prosperity and opportunity for everyone. So what's happened the last 3 or 4 years particularly is that more and more young people have been coming to the United States. And also part of this has to do with problems with the immigration law, where we have this large amount of undocumented people that can't become legal. Most of them are law-abiding. Many of them are from Mexico and Central America. There's no legal way for them to bring their children to the United States. Many of them came because of economic problems in Central America or Mexico. They can't legally bring their children to the United States. They want their children to be with them. So we got a combination of people that want to bring their children here legally to be with them, to be as a family, and they've been maintaining, sending money down to Central America and Mexico to help take care of the kids. And at the same time, we have this increasing violence where the young people, Honduras, San Pedro Sula, for example, is the second biggest city in Honduras, has the highest death rate of any country where there's not an active war going on, like Iraq or Syria. I mean, it has, I think, 175 people out of 100,000, amazingly high rate, die every year, and the age where these people are dying is under 17 years old, the average. So it's amazing. violent. One thing that's kind of interesting, to look at also, and make sure that people understand is that the people are mostly becoming here to flee violence, but particularly young people. Even though the United States may be a land of opportunity, they're not coming here because they want just to immigrate to the United States. They're coming here foremost because of the violence in their home country. There's an interesting comparison that can be made of Nicaragua, which is actually the per capita per person the second poorest country in the Americas, the IT, and I think Honduras is the third country, where there's very little immigration of young people from Nicaragua. Even though it's an extremely poor country, like I said, poorer than Guatemala, poorer than El Salvador, poorer than Honduras. Why? Because there isn't the violent conditions in Nicaragua, interestingly enough. So that's just a little reflection. I want to say that people think it is a push and a pull thing. People are pulled to the United States for some reason and are pushed out of their home countries, but primarily what these young people, like Freddy was saying, people are coming here because they're pushed out of their countries because of the violence in their country, because there's not social protections in these countries like there are in the United States to some extent, even though they're under attack all the time.
There's one thing, that you were saying early about, going and asking, of course, like in my case, in that situation, when you don't have no money, how are you going to go to the, embajada or to, ask for paper when you don't have money? And what is it going to tell you? Get out of here.
Or even people who doesn't have money, they are willing to follow the steps to come here with papers.
But it's hard.
Yeah, there isn't legal immigration. And for these kids, there's virtually no way that the kids can go and apply and say, at least to come to the United States. There is some immigration to Spain, interestingly enough. But in terms of what they call asylum, where people say this thing happened to me in Honduras, and some kids have went to Spain. But to the United States, there is no program for kids like Freddy or worse situations in Freddy where they can show how gangs or criminals or have killed their families or driven them out of their homes. But it's not like you can just go to the United States
it's like
consulate and ask to come
and that's
to the
why I
United States.
say,
So
it's like over here you can
well,
go.
let's take a little break right now, and let's encourage people who's watching us, who's interested in immigration, who want to participate. Call the White House. The number is 1-866-473-5915, and call and tell to President Obama to
immigration reform. That's the question. And then part of this is related,
Immigration
Pablo,
reform.
not just to the question about protecting the kids, which is something maybe we'll focus on, but what the legal protections are and why they should be maintained and why they should also include Mexican kids, because that's a whole different scandal that, unfortunately, because of a law that there was a good law that was passed in 2008. Unfortunately, it doesn't include kids from Mexico or Canada, the two adjoining countries, although I have to admit I haven't heard of any kids from Canada that are wanting to come here because of of persecution or violence in Canada. But unfortunately, Mexicans aren't included in that law. But so one thing, we want to keep that law, but at the same time, as Pablo just said, we need to look at this as part of the whole picture of immigration reform and how we need to change the U.S. immigration laws, both to help and recognize the millions of people that are here right now and undocumented, and also to change how we're going to treat young people and people that are fleeing violence. And that they see the United States or have the United States as the only place where they can come to and have a chance to live a peaceful existence.
And we want to repeat again, like, for example, Freddy Martinez, who came here to this country when he was a child, and thanks to an organization that helped him and support him, he is now the owner of a small business, right?
Yeah, I got a
mechanic.
No, it's a tire shop.
A tire shop. So you see, we are not criminals. We're not coming here to take your jobs, because most of the immigrants are working on the fields, picking your food, the apples, the strawberries, the blueberries, the everything. Oh, and we want to take another break and talk a little bit about political participation, how important it is to go and vote in November when the elections are coming, and choose a Democrat, because
We
What are
don't
you
have
gonna
a
do?
choice.
Republicans are not gonna help you. I'm not gonna support immigration reform. They are like paranoid, or they think we're gonna do something bad for the people. But you can register to vote at the offices of Link. These offices are in Madison and Hall, or you can call the Hispanic Center and call Francis. And the people who can vote, please go and vote this November and choose a Democrat who supports immigration reform. Choose a governor who supports immigration reform, and who's going to help us to pass this immigration, you know. And call President Obama and tell him, we need an immigration reform, you know. A lot of people is suffering, a lot of people is being deported, who is in the country already, who's been for more than 20 years, more than 10 years, who are working, who are hardworking people, and don't vote for Terry Land. She's the one who take away the driver's licenses.
Who's
you
that?
know. Terry Land. She's
Secretary
running
of State.
now for the Senate for the Republican Party, and she's bad news for the Hispanics. If she comes to power,
It's
God help
over.
us, you know. Okay, Richard. So now tell us what's going on at the border, right?
Yeah, what's going on, let me talk about is in terms of how we can protect. I don't think, first of all, I'm going to switch that, but I don't think there's a big crisis at the border. We're not being invaded by these young people. And to some extent, this whole phenomenon, or whatever you want to call it, occurrence that happened, started in late May and June, where all of a sudden there was all this media talking about this giant crisis at the border and portraying it as if we were being invaded by these young people. People will remember Rick Perry, the governor of Texas, called out the National Guard, and he ran down there to the border, and the pictures of him in like kind of this paramilitary dress sitting at the border with these military guys, you know, as if there is an invasion of the U.S. border, particularly in the South Texas area. And there's no an invasion to me means something, you know, negative, armed people coming over and trying to take over. That's what wasn't going on. But we do have an increasing number of young people that were coming here. And I think the question or the issue should be, Pablo, is how can we protect those young people? And that's what we should be looking at. It's a humanitarian crisis. Why these children are coming here, which we talked about and Freddy talked about. And then how can we protect those young people? And so there's a couple things legally that I'll briefly touch on. In 2008, Congress passed a law that was called the Protection Against Human Trafficking for Young People, which basically said for people from countries not adjoining the U.S. So again, this is why we have this issue where Mexicans and Canadians aren't protected. But from other countries, if young people under
Richard,
the age of 18...
I'm sorry.
Sure.
To interrupt you, but this is the thing, you know. That's why I say, you know, you was talking about that, you know, like going to, like over there, when you go and talk to about still the government or police and say, you know, this is going on with me. You know what they're going to say? You're a man. You have to do it by yourself, because that happened to me.
Well, the other problem is the police are infiltrated. Well, I just had a case today that we won a decision. It was very unique. It's the first time in the state of Michigan where an immigration judge recognized, and there's a protection with the United Nations called the Convention Against Torture. And this was a young man from northern Honduras, near Tela from the north, that had been threatened to join a gang when he was 17, refused to join a gang, got cut. He even has extensive scars on his neck. And then about 2 months after he refused to join this gang, he was at a party outside with his cousin and a couple of friends. These same gang people who tried to encourage him to be involved in a notorious gang that brings drugs from the ocean and crosses it over to the city San Pedro Sula and brings it to the United States, found them and said, you were the guys that didn't want to join the gang. He ran off in the woods. His cousin and two other guys were killed. It's all well documented. The police knew all about it. They knew the names of the people that did it. Nobody's arrested. He immediately flees to the United States. This happens last year in November. Enters, and he brings with him, because he knew that he would have to show why he was coming to the United States, so he even had with him newspaper articles and a picture of the funeral of his cousin. He gets caught at the border. The guys at the Border Patrol tell him, you can't ask for asylum because you're going to get locked up for 2 years. You don't want to do that. You're just going to have to go back. And if you don't sign this paper that you want to go back right now and give up your rights, then we're going to sign it for you. So he doesn't know what to do. He has a chance to make a phone call. He can't get a hold of his relatives here. So after 3 days of being threatened that if you don't sign these papers, and you're going to be shipped to another place and you're going to be detained there for years, he signs the papers, goes back to Honduras. As soon as he goes back to Honduras, immediately a day later he finds out these people are still looking for him, his grandmother tells him. So he comes back to the United States again, gets caught a second time now because under the immigration law, he had been removed the first time. He has no rights to bond out. He has to stay in detention, and he ends up he's been detained for 9 months now. They send him up to Battle Creek, Michigan, of all places, because there's not enough.
And that happened to me, That happened to me, I'm sorry, but that happened to me. Like I wasn't, I tried the first time, it was so hard. It wasn't that easy, being like in Mexico, because to come over here, I had to cross Guatemala, Mexico. But I was in the cargo train. I wasn't like, getting the bus. I mean, I was trying, to get the train, run and get the train. So it wasn't easy. And I remember I was close to the border. And what happened? They kept me in Mexico. And because they kept me in Mexico, they sent me back. But I don't decide to go back to my country, so I decide to try again, and that's a lot of people that they don't understand that, that just to try, we had to go, we had to go to a lot, like almost, get like killed, because you had to be surviving about, all that time that you had to go from Honduras to Mexico. You had to ask for food, you had to ask for water, for clothes. So it's not easy, And he was talking about, his story that he was like trying to run away from that situation too. So, but a lot of people, still, they don't understand that we go through a lot, like almost like in my case, I was 3 in the morning in that train. Doesn't matter if it was raining, was cold, whatever. But I was trying to, you know what I used to do? When I was in that train, I used to tie myself because I don't want to fall from that train. Because I know as I fell from that train, I'm that person.
A lot of people is dying like in those trips, like children and adults. They travel on the top of the train. And it's very, very dangerous. It's so dangerous they call this train, the cross Mexico, is called the Beast.
The Beast,
yeah.
Because a lot of people falling from the train and they
got trapped.
their arms are amputated.
You see
their
a
arms,
lot
their
of
legs.
You see a lot of bad things, sad things.
We're making an appealing to the humanity of the American people.
Yeah, unfortunately for the kids, if you're under 18 and you're from not Canada or Mexico, there's protections, and under the law currently that we have, and thank God there was a Republican movement to try to change that law and take away those protections in June. It didn't. They were not able to change or take away those protections, and hopefully, depending on what happens in the elections in November, they won't be able to do that after the elections next year. But we have a situation, at least for the kids that are under 18 from Central America. Once they get here, there's certain protections for them. They have a right to have a hearing. They have a right to be protected. They have a right to be sent to a center that's not a detention government. It's not run by immigration. It's run by Office of Refugee Resettlement. They're usually placed in nonprofit organizations here like Bethany Services and other good programs. So there is a program in place right now to give protections. We have to make sure that we continue to protect those kids, because that's the bottom line, is keeping these kids safe and alive and giving them an opportunity, not treating them as if they're criminals, here to come and try to take over from the United States. And we have to make sure that we keep those protections, that we welcome these people, that we don't let these kind of hate mongers that are running around saying these kids are going to come here and kill us, or they bring diseases when we know that, that they've been tested and they, in fact, have a much lower incident of disease than kids here in the United States. So it's very important that we continue to keep the protections for these kids.
It's very important that you go to go and vote. And vote for
and the bottom line
Democrats.
is, what
And
is
vote for
the
people who's
elections
gonna help us.
that are may criticize
And-
the politicians for not being, keeping promises all the time. But there are major differences, like Pablo said, in the area of immigration between the two political parties.
And we wanna help thank our guests, Freddy Martinez, Richard Kessler, and Raymond Trujillo.
Thank you for inviting me.
And I thank you too. My name is Pablo Bello.
Thank you, Pablo,
thank
for
you.
bringing these issues. in
This
front
is
of people.
Tiempo Latino. You can see us in YouTube
Time
too, and
flies.
Facebook. You can go to GrandRapidsTiempoLatino.com. And thank you, and we are appealing to your humanity. Thank you very much, and we see you next month, or maybe before our next show. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Freddy.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Raymond.
Thank you, Pablo.
Thank you.
And we wait for you guys at our price.
Oh, yes.
Time flying, man. It was so short. But you know what?
Thank you, Richard.